Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Geopolitical Cousins. I'm Jacob Shapiro. Marco and I are back at it. I was recording at like 9:30 p.m. Central Time after giving 2 speeches today and a couple interviews and a bunch of other things. So I felt like I was not my full fucking self. But sometimes I find that people actually think I'm best when I'm a little bit tired. And I don't give a fuck. And Marco also stayed up late to do this too. We didn't want to go a week without giving you some content, especially as we go into the holidays. So we hope you enjoy. Even if I didn't have my fastball, I was throwing the knuckleballs out there and Marco was hitting them out of the park. So we'll see you out there. Cheers. All right, listeners, it is December 11th. It's 9:24 p.m. in Bismarck, North Dakota, and 2 degrees here. I've given 2 speeches today, 2 interviews, a corporate presentation, which means, Marco, I'm in I don't give a fuck territory. I'm about to unload. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm in my client call week, so I haven't gone anywhere. I'm at home, but you know, I have 7 call days. Today wasn't that. Today I even got some basketball. You know, it was awesome. It was awesome. I played a former colleague who's 29 years old, and I beat him, and that was awesome.
Very nice.
4-1. We played a best of 7 series, and it was a gentleman's sweep. So I feel very good. Also, I think endorphins are just flowing over my old body. So like I'm just, you know, ready to cook. We're both in I don't give a fuck mode.
That sounds great. Well, then let's start here. On a scale of 1 to 10, Marco, how cool do you think Hitler is? Inquiring masses want to know.
Yeah. I just, you know, that's just not an appropriate scale for Hitler. I would answer it that way.
What scale do you want to put in then?
Not the cool scale. Not the cool scale. It is,
well,
Hitler.
Yeah, that was my biggest Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Like this is your topic.
No. That's not what. Just because he killed 6 million of me doesn't mean that it's my topic. That's fine. You can have the topic too. I'm sure he would have killed a bunch of Serbians if he could have gotten that far, but he kind of got bogged down in the Russian winter, you know?
No, he had other people do that for him. So like actually my great uncle was killed in a concentration camp. So there's a little a nifty story. Not a Jew, but in his particular case, he was a Serb located in a wrong location. And so off to the concentration camp he went. But yeah, so like you're referring, of course, to this incredible piece of television where Piers Morgan is interviewing Nick Fuentes. Now, I got to apologize to everybody listening to this. I am supposedly a professional commentator on politics and geopolitics, but I actually have no idea who Nick Fuentes is. I mean, like, I've heard the name. He comes up a lot. And then this was actually the first time I've ever seen his face. I was like, oh my God, he looks really young. Like, I didn't know this person is so young. And Piers Morgan was so serious, you know? And this was, I don't know, we should definitely include the YouTube clip in the show notes.
Yeah.
Now, for those of us
who
who listen to this, to us for geopolitics and who don't necessarily care about American politics that much, can you explain to them and also to me a little bit about Nick Fuentes? Like, give us a little background. Like, what are we talking about here? Why are we talking about this? Why is he on Piers Morgan's show? You know?
You know, I'm only a little bit ahead of you on this. He only came into my consciousness about 2 weeks ago because everybody was talking about him, and I finally was like, I gotta find out who this guy is because they keep on talking about him. I can't even put a face to a name. And I'm probably gonna get some of the details wrong, but in terms of the origin story, I think he worked at Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro for a while. He had like his own middling show or something like that, and he was too much for Ben Shapiro. This, by the way, is the only time in my life that I've been on the same side as Ben Shapiro. It's just creating all sorts of cognitive dissonance for me. But he eventually left and started doing his own thing and just developed this huge following based on his ideas. And
what's his thing?
He's very obvious. He's a shock. I mean, I don't know what his thing is. He's a shock jock. He talks about he's anti-woke and he wants white people to be proud of themselves again. And he's America first. It's a strange cocktail of things. And one of the things I find so confusing about him is I don't find him particularly charismatic. Like, I don't really know how he got such a large following. Anyway, but I mean, if you want, like, you know, his show is called America First. He promotes Christian nationalism. There's little white supremacy, or maybe a lot of white supremacy seasoning in there, a lot of misogyny. He is to the right of Charlie Kirk. Like, him and his followers would heckle Charlie Kirk at some of his events. So we're talking about sort of the far right of the far right here. And then the thing that created all of this hubbub was he said Hitler was cool. Piers Morgan decided to have him on, went at him about the Hitler was cool thing. And then I don't know if you saw afterwards, Fuentes put out this 20-minute rebuttal to Piers Morgan. Yeah. And we can get into that in a second if you want. So maybe start with the Piers Morgan thing, and then I'll talk about the response. Because the response in some ways is even more shocking to me than the Piers Morgan thing.
I mean, I think that mainstream media is just a bunch of, kind of morons, to be honest with you, because they've kind of created this person. You and I have a job. It's to keep abreast of important political and geopolitical events and people and statements. And we are struggling to start our show off. Our listeners right now are like, these guys did not come prepared. And the truth is we didn't, because we're not going to learn about this random dude who's basically a YouTuber. And what I find hilarious is that the only reason you and I are talking about it is because we found out off of this clip on Piers Morgan's show that he thinks Hitler is cool. Like, let's pump the brakes a little. Like, this is insanity. Number one, why is he on Piers Morgan's show? Why is Piers Morgan caricaturing him and then lecturing him? And by the way, one thing I agreed 100% with Nick Fuentes was like, can you shut up? Is this an interview? Like, and the reason I agree and 100% think Nick Fuentes was right, like, yo, boomer, can you let me talk? The reason I thought that moment was really cool is that, like, you need to shut up, Piers, and let this kid hang himself. We don't need to hear Piers Morgan tell us why the Holocaust was vile. We need you to shut up, do your job, which is to let Nick Fuentes say as many things as possible, so that anyone with half a brain who has thought that he was like a cute kid can just be like, oh, no, he's just a moron. And by the way, and maybe not. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think actually we have any empirical evidence that Nick Fuentes is a moron, because he's on Piers Morgan. And you and I are talking about him, I mean, he has gamed the system. He's effectively a TikToker and Instagrammer and whatever. You and I have a podcast, so we shouldn't, we shouldn't be calling, I guess, a calling a kettle black, whatever. The thing is, he's in the ether.
No, it's fine. We're trying to get in. We are trying to get in on the clicks. I am unashamedly trying to get on the clicks, because I know people are going to want to listen to this, and I want to get in on the clicks. But I have two things here. The first is Piers, or anybody who is engaging with Nick Fuentes, and I hope that Nick Fuentes listens to this and wants to come on, because the thing that I would go at him on is, let's put the mass murder aside, because even he says that the mass murder was bad. This notion that Hitler is cool.
To his credit. Let's
yeah. He's not cool. He was not a cool person. There was nothing about Hitler that was cool. He was a school dropout. He sucked at art. He tried to sell his paintings around. He got into the Nazi party. There were a bunch of rejects and thugs who nobody else in society wanted them. At first, they just threw him in jail and didn't take him seriously. He spent a whole couple of years writing a book called Imagine if I went to, if I went away for 2 years and wrote a book, My Struggle. Everybody would think I was a fucking asshole. And he was an asshole. He had no empathy for anyone. He was a tweaker by the end of it all. Like, we're supposed to say, like, what was cool about him, and this is where when he doubles down, because Fuentes couldn't help himself. Piers Morgan didn't let him have the rope to hang himself, so he comes out with this 20-minute thing about why he actually thinks Hitler is cool. And first, he talks about the fashion and the architecture and the unstoppable military, and I'm like, okay, like, the fashion kind of sucked. The military was stopped, and also, like, Hitler was, like, he was a failed artist. Like, there was no grand vision of architecture. But the next sentence is, he says, the thing that is cool about it is you see white people without self-imposed guilt and shame.
That's crazy.
And the thing that is cool about it.
Wait. And that's the thing. Like, first of all, the whole problem that the right wing, including centrist conservatives, perfectly sane, educated, well-meaning people have with wokeness. One of the critical problems you have with what is generally referred to as the woke left is the grievances, right?
Yeah.
And now you can also from the liberal side say, yes, but a lot of people do have grievances. They were slaves for 500 years. So, that's a grievance. Like, it's a fair one. Why would you adopt that part of wokeness if you are like, you're basically woke. You're white woke. And apparently Nick Fuentes, when he got woke, when he woke up, when he took the blue pill or red pill or whatever the pill that he took, he found out that Hitler was cool and that we have a negative narrative about the Nazis. Like, buddy, your ancestors, maybe your grandfather, fought against these people. Like, they do not represent white people. Like, Hitler is not a representation of white people. That is not like, and what I can't believe is that somebody follows this guy. It's like, yeah, man, all this time I was taught the wrong history in school. Like, bro, like, Hitler is one of the pillars of whitedom. No, he's not. He's not. White people fought against Hitler. The vast majority of whiteys fought Hitler, for God's sakes. So, that was the part. You're totally right, Jacob. The grievance narrative, number one. What are you, like, Nazi woke? You're woke Nazi. Okay, cool. Let's just, Nick Fuentes, you're a woke Nazi. Got it. You have grievances, But the other thing is to associate Hitler with the grievances of white people of America is insane, because it was white people of America who ultimately kicked Hitler's ass with, of course, the help of white people of Russia. Like, so it's insane. Like, this, it just reveals a level of, like, just lack of historical context that, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I was just Googling his family background. I guess I should have done this before. His father was half Mexican, and he's of Italian, Irish, and Mexican descent. So if Hitler saw this guy, he probably would have sent him straight to where I was going as well in terms of Hitler's.
Oh, no, like, like you, Jacob, would have definitely been the lowest on the rung. But me and Nick, buddy, we're like not that many rungs higher
you're
than
right
you.
Behind.
Yeah, we're right. We're right, maybe there somewhere, right behind you. Like, look, I think, but there's what I mean, I'm getting a brain aneurysm. I'm like literally in the process of brain.
It's funny to watch.
And what's funny about it is that I bet if Nick was here with us, he would be like, bro, you're just like a boomer. Like, first and foremost, I'm not. Second of all, I could talk about like crazy shit. Jacob and I, this is what we do for a living. We make light of what's not light. This is not a show for the faint-hearted, right? Like, we will talk about grisly shit and try to be analytical about it. And I'm being analytical about you, Nick, and you don't know what you're talking about. And not because, like, mainly because Hitler has nothing to do with grievances of white people anywhere. You know what I mean? Anywhere. He was not a pro-white person in any way, shape, or form. His ideology selected a single group, a very specific group of whites, and then he set out to kill millions of other almost predominantly white people. Like, okay? So what are we talking about here, buddy? The second thing that I wanted to cook on is in this 20-minute thing, which I didn't watch. But the only part that I saw...
Oh, hold on. Wait. I know that you're going to cook on this. Let me just say one thing fast before you cook on that, because I know where you're going.
Please.
The first thing was when you were saying about the, my ancestors were slaves 500 years ago, I can't help but invoke that Chappelle sketch where when you're arguing with a Jew and you bring up slavery for black people, the Jew will always go, well, don't forget about Egypt. And it's like, Egypt? I didn't know we were going back to Egypt. We got the Israelites. So I always like to throw that in there. And then the second thing is just that this is a really weird thing, but I had a 5-hour car ride today from Huron, South Dakota to Bismarck, North Dakota. And I rewatched that Brene Brown TED Talk about vulnerability and shame, because I was looking at Nick Fuentes and I was like, a social worker needs to get their hands on this guy because something is wrong. And one of the things that Brene Brown talks about, if you haven't watched this TED Talk, listeners, you should. It like changed the way I think about the world in some ways. But she talks about how basically like vulnerability is the key to living a wholehearted life, and that people who try to numb selectively their feelings can't live wholeheartedly and can't actually form connections with people. And the thing that I want to say, and this goes back to Trump meeting with Mamdani and about AOC and Vance basically being the same type of thing, the woke left does not want to feel uncomfortable ever. They are allergic to discomfort. And Nick Fuentes is telling you, word for word, I don't want to feel ashamed of what white people did before. And I'm sorry, Nick, like, we've done some bad shit. And if you're going to be a wholehearted person who is actually like a completely self-realized person, you have to look at everything that white people in the United States have done and still have an irrational faith that we are good, that we hold these truths to be self-evident and everything else, and that we can improve on the things that came before. But if you're going to selectively numb, that's exactly how you become tweaker sociopath who can't sell his paintings and drops out of school and does the beer hall push. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. Now cook on Darth Vader,
wait.
please.
Wait, before we cook on Darth Vader, I want to have my moment of like some thoughtfulness. My 16-year-old daughter came to me today and showed me on TikTok this ICE recruitment video. And there are many of them, and I just didn't want to watch because I know they're all stupid and they're rah-rah. But this one is like, 'tis the season for cuffing. And it's set to like this cool like rap song, and you've got people getting cuffed. You know, and basically like immigrants and, you know, deported. And it's a recruitment video. And it's, you know, like set to like a rap. Like, what I would say is that none of this is okay. Like, you know, saying Hitler is cool if you're like high with your buddies and you're like, yo, I've got a take. Fine. The reason that we don't do these things is because you're just mean. It's just mean to say. Now, Piers Morgan was annoying. He kept saying some like random Jewish guy in UK, how do you think he feels? And Nick Fuentes is like, I don't care. You know, that's fine. Okay. Sure, whatever. But the point is, it's not about some like person in the United Kingdom that Piers Morgan brings up. It's just mean. It's mean to say that. It will hurt some people. Why do you want to hurt people? And I understand the concept of punching up in comedy. That's like, you know, we all understand that. But why would you like want to make some like old lady, you know, who remembers her parents who like disappeared in the Holocaust? Why would you want her to just feel bad? Or similarly, why would you put that to TikTok? Like, why would the United States of America, the federal government, create a TikTok video set to Christmas rap music, 'tis the season for cuffing? Look, you broke the law, you came into the country illegally, you know, this president believes you should be deported. He won a democratic election. A lot of people on the left got to deal with it and maybe go out and vote next time. Hey, I don't know. Or maybe not put out a terrible candidate. Like, you can stomach a lot of things, but it doesn't have to be done in such a callous way. And if they lose the midterms and if they lose the presidency in 28, they should go back to that TikTok video. And you know this show, Jacob. Like, I give you shit all the time because, like, I can defend Donald Trump, I think, much more than you do. But, like, that's not a necessary video. And I think that that is like, there is a line, and the line is just being mean, you know, and being mean to like just regular people. Like, why would you want to make someone who is like less comfortable than you are in life? Why would you want to make them feel afraid? Why would you want to be mean to them? That's not what like true leadership is about. And I am talking also about Nick Fuentes. Like, you have grievances that like white people of America have been, you know, like somehow, okay, cool, be a leader then. Like, you don't have to be mean to some old lady who's like, you know, anyways, I thought that those two things happened over the last 24 hours, and I was really thinking about it. And I just don't see a lot of that in the world. Like, I don't really see Xi Jinping using TikTok to just be mean. Like, I gotta say that, like, you know, Vladimir Putin, yes. On occasion, yes. Although there's even a seriousness about the Kremlin, quite frankly. Like, at least they pretend, you know, that they're serious people who take stuff seriously. That was like, it's not necessary. Like, I'm all about trying to be glib and irreverent. I think a lot of my clients know me that way. Those in the public who know I'm irreverent. But like, I wouldn't want to make someone feel like shit. You know, and so that was what was interesting about both of those. Nick Fuentes and this ICE video happened at the same time. It's like Christmas season, you know, like what's going on here? And I know you don't understand that, obviously. I'm just joking. That was a joke.
The other part of it was like you were joking that we don't have to worry about Nick Fuentes that much. I actually do have to worry about Nick Fuentes, because if somebody who is a commentator who has a lot of following says Hitler is cool and he's not immediately being shouted down by supporters, which he's not. Like Nick Fuentes has legions of supporters where I'll just say, no, like he's just being authentic. Okay, he's being authentic about how, like literally one sentence is, I'm not for white people killing people. I hate the Holocaust. But the reason that Hitler is cool is because that's what happens when white people basically kill people. And I'm like, okay with that. There's like the self-enforcing thing. But also, like, I can't tell you in my own community, how many people are freaking out about Comrade Mamdani in New York City, and how this guy is an anti-Semite, and the Democratic Socialists of America are anti-Semites, and they're coming for the Jews again, and the far left, and they didn't support the Jews on October 7th. You know where Mamdani was yesterday? He was hanging out at a party of Satmar or ultra-Orthodox Jews in Williamsburg, wearing a yarmulke, dancing around with them as they were celebrating the oncoming holiday of Hanukkah. You know who's not doing that? Nick Fuentes. So who's the real anti-Semite, and what do we need to worry about with anti-Semitism? I'm not worried about the weenie left anti-Semitism, because they're going to come to our Hanukkah parties and everything's going to be fine. I'm worried about the guy who looks me straight in the face and says, Hitler was cool. And the tens of thousands of people or millions of people who listen to him being like, yeah, like Nick Fuentes is my guy. He's being totally authentic. Like that bothers me. So anyway.
You know that famous line in The Big Lebowski, when Goodman goes, say what you will about National Socialism, but at least it was an ethos. You know that line?
Yeah. Yeah.
So why do I bring that up? Is I got to tell you, I mean, and obviously I respect your perspective as a Jew. I got to say, I'm not really afraid of Nick Fuentes at all. I just think he's just being mean and a bully. And the reason I say that is I don't think he has an ethos other than to get clicks online. Because I think to a lot of people who say, yeah, Hitler was cool, I think to them it means nothing because they're so vastly uneducated that there is no actual ethos behind it. Somebody in 1957, like if you and I are in Buenos Aires in 1957, we run into a guy with a slight German accent who says Hitler is cool, like, bro, be afraid of that guy. You know what I mean? Like, that guy has an ethos, whereas I think Nick Fuentes doesn't even know what the fuck he's talking about. Like, so that's why I'm both looking at him in far less of like concern than you are. And obviously that is your prerogative, obviously for good reason. But at the same time, I just think that it's, why does everything have to be so mean in today's world? Why is that our default setting? And I think that's, unnecessary. It's just unnecessary. Like, he clearly doesn't understand the Third Reich at all. If he thinks it was some sort of a representation of whiteness, he is an idiot if he thinks that. Like, that's an easy historical lesson. What I would say to that is, because of that, his statements actually don't concern me, other than that it shows a complete lack of decorum in our public discourse where, that's who gets the clicks. And then, of course, what he should also be criticized for is his absolute inability to make a pop culture analogy. Like Darth Vader is cool. But the reason that Darth Vader is cool is because he's a fictional character who at the end does redeem himself and throws Emperor Palpatine to his death. Okay? There's nothing redeeming about Hitler. Yeah, to your point that he was a school dropout, a failed artist. Like in 2025, Hitler would be like serving me a fucking latte. Like that's what he would be doing. But anyways, like there's nothing redeemable by Hitler, because when he got finally caught, he killed himself because he was weak and a coward, and he tried to destroy Germany in those last few hours. So you're totally right. There's nothing cool about him, but like you can't really compare him to a fictional character who is cool. There's a lot of cool things about him. Plus he was, voiced by James Earl Jones. So that's cool as well. You can put on a Darth Vader costume because there's nobody from Alderaan. Like, yo, bro, like take off that costume. Like me and my parents, we were on a business trip from Alderaan when that thing happened, when that shit went down. We've got 600 million people.
Yeah, although, that's such a great point, because who's the one who decides to destroy Alderaan? It's not Darth Vader, it's Tarkin.
It's Tarkin.
He's the Hitler character. Nobody is saying Tarkin is cool, because he's not cool. He's a sociopath.
And Darth Vader did criticize the move in a way, but like he's part of the genocidal, like, let's be clear here, like, the evil empire.
Yes,
yeah. And he did kill a bunch of sand
your
people,
point is taken.
Like, right, and children. So there's a lot of things that Anakin Skywalker has done that's wrong. The point is that when you go as a Halloween character and you're dressed like, which I did, by the way, I don't know if you remember, it's one of the Stratford Halloween parties, and when it's Darth Vader. No one's going to find that out on WikiLeaks and be like, Marko went as Vader face. You know why? Because there are no people from Alderaan walking around Earth being like, bro, my grandma was there when they pulled the lever and Death Star destroyed Alderaan. That's why Darth Vader is cool, because he's fictional. And it's okay to wear him as a costume. You don't walk around as Hitler as a costume unless you're a certain member of the royal family, but let's leave that aside. But you shouldn't, because you may run into someone who that's just mean for, and your reaction shouldn't be like, oh, get over it. No. Why would you want to do that to other fellow human beings? That's what I don't understand. That's the part of this that, like, even my cold nihilist heart is just really shocked by. And I think that's not cool.
Yeah. Well, you should watch Andor, by the way. Like, you're going to love Andor when you actually find the time. Maybe over the break you can do that. Okay, we've talked about Nick Fuentes and Star Wars for long enough, so let's talk about geopolitics a little bit. I think we want to pick up with our national security strategy conversation from last time, because it got a lot of responses. So where do you want to pick up on the national security strategy conversation, Marko?
I was in defense of it. You were against it. And I think that overwhelmingly, the media narrative is against it. Even the people who are for it haven't really gotten any airplay, because no one really cares. The one thing that's gotten a lot of play is that the Europeans are aghast at their treatment in the national security strategy. And so I've been asked a lot by a lot of people, like, wait a minute, but this is pretty serious. It looks like US is abandoning Europe. That's not actually in the document. So that's why I disagreed with it. But I think that it is worth discussing this civilizational aspect that's clearly focused on domestic European politics, and how, basically it's a national security strategy of the US. I mean, first of all, it's perfectly fine for President Trump to say, I hate the EU. Like, fine, that's his prerogative. Whatever. You can do that. But national security strategy should not descend to the level of like domestic politics. Like, why are you obsessed with this? And so in a way, what the national security actually says, and I think this is something that most people didn't understand, is that we can't let Europe collapse, because that will be bad for the US. That is actually what it's saying. Now, their reasoning for the collapse of the EU is, to many people, very vile. It's like effectively immigration of non-Europeans to Europe. Like, that's fundamentally what the national security strategy says. Like, this is bad for Europe. Europeans seem to be completely ignorant of that. But what I would say to those who criticize that bit, and that's perfectly fine, I'm prepared to criticize that as well. The core issue is still that the national security strategy identifies Europe as critical to American security, and its authors are simply stating that they think that Europe is at risk of liberal immigration policies. To which I would say that, that's clearly someone watching way too many YouTube videos. And, I think there's a plethora of evidence that there is no risk to European makeup. But we can leave that. We can debate that later. I just think that that's all I wanted to kind of say about this. I think, yes, I understand that we can disagree vehemently with the idea that Europe is at risk due to immigrants or civilizational collapse or whatever. We can actually add empirical evidence, data. But the issue is, for me, the national security strategy of the United States of America wasn't just criticizing Europe wantonly without like the whole point was whatever destabilizes Europe destabilizes America. And I think that's lost in the criticism.
I hear what you're saying, but I think the way that they say things really does matter. Like I was catching up with Van Jackson the other day, and he was the one who pointed this out to me. So shout out to him. That the language that is used in the Europe section is civilizational erasure. And that is very, very specific. I mean, we're talking about Hitler and Nick Fuentes now. This is like white genocide or great replacement narrative type language. And it's about, I mean, like that Norwegian neo-Nazi who did that shooting back in 2011, Anders Breivik or whatever.
Yeah.
Like this was the sort of stuff he talked about. He talked about civilizational erasure. So they're taking these talking points about the decline of white people in Europe and saying that the thing that Europe is in danger of, they're not really in danger of Russia. They're not really in danger of China. Like, yes, the German chemical companies need to not be so dependent on Chinese inputs. But when push comes to shove, the problem is civilizational erasure, which is basically like the white people are going away. And so we're laughing at Nick Fuentes earlier, but part of the reason I start to like sort of sit up in my chair is because, okay, like it is not such a big leap from civilizational erasure talk to Hitler is cool talk.
Yes.
Like those things are closer than we might think.
Okay, so let's come back to that because I want to violently agree with you. But before I do that, I just want to say one thing though. There's a lot of interpretation. I mean, I can just Google and send you a plethora of links that says that this document pits Europe and US against each other. You know, and what you just said, let's forget how vile it is, does not actually do that. In other words, let me give you this example. You and I are, of course, really good friends. Let's say that I was obsessed with this idea that solar radiation was going to give you cancer because you're losing your hair.
Thank you.
Right, let's say that I was one, and you're like, Marco, I'm okay. I'm gonna be fine. And I'm like, no, I care about you so deeply. This, like, we need to do something. And then I send you hats for every month. I send you a different hat. You'd be like, bro, I'm okay. What am I getting at? The national security strategy identifies a problem with Europe that I think is idiotic, and it's like a denizens of YouTube channels are the ones that are propagating this thesis. But it doesn't mean that Europe and America in this document are pitted against each other. It's just that America says, hey, Europe, we need you to be strong and vital. And in our view, that means white. And also you need to like limit immigrants. You know, now, all I'm trying to say before we assault the premise itself, all I want to say is that there is no evidence that US and Europe are pitted against each other. Other than that, of course, on a sort of ideological level, they're clearly two ships passing each other by the knife. Like one is like, hey, man, we got to like make sure the civilization stays Western European, whatever. And that rose to the level.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Well, let me ask you this question then, because what I think you're making a really good point. But another thing that's in the document is this thing about the primacy of nations and about how bad international organizations are and how bad the European Union is. And if what you want is a strong Europe, I mean, disagree with me if you want, but it doesn't seem to me that any individual European state is capable of the things that the Trump administration is asking for with European greatness. The way to make Europe strong again is to do what Churchill originally envisioned, which was an actual United States of Europe. Like, stop with the pussyfooting around and the half in, half out thing. Like, be a true union of European states. You're either in or you're not. So you would think the way to do that would be to say yes to the European Union. But at the same time that they're talking about European greatness, they're undermining the thing that could make the EU great, which is the EU itself, right?
Right. So this is where I would say that that's a very America-centric view. And here's where I would like want to cleanse you of it.
Please cleanse me. The healing waters of Alderaan.
Yes. Look, if I'm European, right, and I have access to data of support for the euro or the EU, I would be like, bro, like, cool. You don't like the EU, that's great. Vast majority of Europeans actually do. So we have access to data, for example, on acceptance of the euro area. Germans support the euro. in 2025 at an 87% clip. 27% of Germans support the AfD, which is anti-Euro. So AfD is the party that Trump loves, invited him to the White House. What does that tell you? It means that half of all supporters of AfD, when asked, do you support the Euro, say, yes, we do. So there is a lot of truth in what Trump and his advisors say, in that a lot of Europeans do have a problem with immigrants. That's the key issue here. But what America thinks about the EU is irrelevant to Europe. That is the vessel that Europeans have chosen with which to fight 21st century fights, whether it's global trade policy, whether it's immigration. The EU is the vessel that's being used to actually bolster European borders, like the Bulgaria-Turkey border fence, which is effectively a wall. Europeans effectively built a wall that, Americans debate about. Europeans got it. Frontex went from a sleepy commission agency of 150 overpaid bureaucrats to like an army. So Europeans, every time there's a crisis in Europe, the Europeans choose, begrudgingly, kind of being dragged by their feet. They bitch and moan, but they choose the EU as a vessel to solve the problem. Whatever the problem is, the EU is always chosen as the problem. So this is why I don't understand this. It's a very American, and like American liberals are still American. And what I mean by that is they're like, oh my God, our president is undermining the EU. And I'm like, bro, so like what? It's ultimately what the Europeans want. And I can tell you what they want because I can look at the data. And the data is Europeans still want European integration. They have a lot of problems with it. It's not black and white. But there's been plenty of opportunities over the last 20 years to leave the EU one way or another. The United Kingdom did it. Nobody else has. This is not an institution on its deathbed. And yet, American liberals elevate their own president that they hate to such a level of prominence that when he says, I hate the EU, they're like, we must defend the EU. From what? From who? From Donald Trump? What's he going to do? What is he going to finance the AfD? By the way, that's probably the kiss of death for him. FYI. Like, I'm pretty sure that European voters are not sitting there being like, oh, I wonder what the American president wants. You know what I mean? Like, come on. This Europe. You see what I mean? Does that make sense to you? In a way, you're almost giving Trump too much agency here. At the end of the day, the document says we need Europe to solve all these things on its own. We need Europe to be strong. Clearly, the only way to do that is via the EU. Therefore, the paradox is that the American national security strategy, which criticizes the EU, enables it at the same time. Because who else are you going to call in Europe to solve these problems? Like your buddy Viktor Orban, who runs a country of 10 million people in the middle of the Pannonian Plains. It hasn't mattered. It hasn't mattered in any way, shape, or form since Attila the Hun. Come on. No, it's going to be the EU. It's going to be Germany, France, Italy. And I have a plethora of data. Anyone listening to this and is like, what is he talking about? Europeans hate the EU. No, they don't. If they did, they wouldn't be in it. So I'm not really worried that President Trump doesn't like the EU. Like, it's cool. Like, fine, put it in the national security strategy. You won the election. You get to do whatever you want. But why are we sitting here and being like, oh no, poor EU? Like, relax, guy.
That's fair. What does your data say about France? I always thought France was the one that was ironically the most Eurosceptic of all. Do they like the EU?
So the problem with asking if you like the EU, Jacob, is that 25% of Americans like their government. Yeah. So like that's the one thing. Like support for the EU. Look, most Europeans have grievances against the EU. What I used is the euro. Because the euro is like specific outcome of European integration, and it's the one that gets the most hate. But it's like, you can say like, no, I hate the EU. Those assholes in Brussels make us shape bananas like this, and I like my bananas like that, which is weirdly phallic, and I don't know why we discuss it, but that was a problem.
We discuss it because Boris Johnson was writing those columns and getting paid by the word for them, and he
That's
did.
Right.
I thought it was it cucumbers or bananas? I can't remember.
I don't know.
Maybe it was both.
Both are quite phallic. But anyways, like the euro is the interesting one, and I just looked at this the other day, and support for the euro in France has gone from 60% in 2020, which was the bottom. It's now at like about 79%.
Oh, that's good.
Germany is at 87%. The euro area average for this, the euro area average is about 82%. The EU average, which includes many countries that don't have the euro and don't want it, is slightly above 70%. So, look, the reality is that's a great proxy. Like if you're French and you want the EU to dissolve, by definition, you would want the euro to not exist. There is about 20% of those people in France. And it's shrinking. It is shrinking, which is why Marine Le Pen, who is somebody that I think ideologically President Trump would really appreciate as a president of France, she is not anti-euro anymore, nor is she anti-EU institutions. Giorgia Meloni, we talked about this, the Trump whisperer.
Your girl.
My girl, yeah. She has never been anti-euro. There is Geert Wilders, who has an ethos, who has stood on various principles. Even he has said, basically, it's not time for this now. It is not the time. I wonder why. Maybe because Russia's at the gates. And then finally, the only party in Europe that still is truly anti-EU and the euro is Alternative for Deutschland, which is the AfD, which is leading in the polls in Germany with 26, 27, 28%. So plurality, not even close to a majority. My argument is that if they ever came to power, they would have to have a coalition, obviously, and everybody else in Germany is pretty much pro-euro. So this thing is not going away, and I don't understand why we put so much onus on what American politicians think about the EU. Who cares? Like, this isn't 1946, where Europe is beset with tens of millions of refugees, and America has to, turn the lights on in the continent that's ravaged by war. It's not up to Trump. So, and by the way, on that point, he's been very consistent on this. He said he didn't like the EU back in 2016 and 17. So, there's no new information on this. I don't know why we made such a big deal about it. To me, the bottom line is... America's misdiagnosed... I
violently agree with you.
Listen, America has misdiagnosed the problem with Europe. It's over-indexed on this immigration civilizational issue because people in the White House who wrote this, many of them, not all, but I think some of them clearly watch too many YouTube, clickbait, and are like, oh my God, Europe is being overrun by all these immigrants. And so it sneaked its way into the national security strategy. But what I want to emphasize is it did so because these same people who misdiagnosed Europe's problem also do want Europe to not collapse. And so, hey, they can invite me and I can explain how the math works. You know how the math works? I'll tell you how the math works. Let's say you go to Europe from Morocco or Algeria or Somalia or one of these countries that is civilizationally, I guess, offside, according to the authors of this document. And let's say that you had grand visions of having a very big, large family. You move to Amsterdam or Stockholm or Paris, and you're like, I'm going to have 9 kids. Okay, so let's say you do that. You do that. You have 8 to 9 kids. And oh, here he comes. Here's the demographic, tipping point. What do you think your kids are going to do? They were born in Paris or Amsterdam or Stockholm. They're surrounded by kids of different ethnicities and stuff. And guess what they're also surrounded by? They're surrounded by first world cost of living. What every study shows is that by the second generation, I don't care where you're from, you're going to have 1.5 kids in Europe. That's what happens. So if you look, for example, all these linear forecasts, they're so stupid. The people who do this math are at least Nick Fuentes has a charming smile. These people are just really don't know what they're doing. They will linearly extrapolate the Muslim population of France. The Muslim population of France has been stuck at 10%. Why? Because again, it is very, very difficult. People become French. Okay. That's why. That's why. And so no, there's no demographic disaster or collapse in Europe other than, everybody has too few kids. If you want to talk about the demographic collapse of Europe, It's not a collapse of some white race or some nonsense like that. It's just the fact that everybody has too few kids. So I think that, whoever wrote this, that bit just misdiagnoses. There's many problems Europe has, but like too many immigrants is not one of them.
No, and I just want to violently agree with you and say that same thing that you're talking about, which is where, we're over-indexing on what the United States has to say about the European Union. It's not going to affect the European Union. It's the same thing with the Russia-Ukraine war. President Trump's been trying to end the Russia-Ukraine war since the day he got into office. He promised he would do so, and neither Putin nor Zelensky are listening to him. They're just like, thank you for your attention to this matter, President Trump, but we're not doing anything. And nothing that President Trump does ends the war. And if you want to understand, President Trump applying this unipolar foreign policy to a multipolar world, he can't end the Russia-Ukraine war. He can't get Israel to not bomb Iran. The things that he can't do just seem to proliferate. So I think you're right. I think we over-index too much on what the United States is saying and not on what reality tells us is happening in front of us.
Well, and I think that it's an interesting point in that the liberal criticism of this national security strategy was it was mean to Europe. And that goes back to my point. If I'm mean to Jacob about something that is just not true, then I'm just misinformed. It doesn't.
Well, and I thought you perfectly diagnosed the reason that the liberal establishment is in such a tizzy about this document is because the document is honest about the hegemonic decline of the United States. And the classic liberal cannot accept that the United States is in hegemonic decline. They can't accept that the job of the United States is not to be anything to everywhere all at once. Now, one of my problems with the document is it says that on one page, and on the next page it says, and by the way, we should invade every other continent in the world and have the strongest military and everything else. So I think it's not actually following through on its thing. But liberals hate this document, I think, because it's literally saying we're not exceptional. We're going to deal with the dictators. We're not going to be the top dog anymore. We have to think about the world in much different terms. And the liberal brain can't accommodate that. It has to be the shining city on the hill for all eternity.
But Jacob, no one's written that op-ed. So they're throwing darts at...
We just did.
We did. No, I know. But the darts that are being thrown at it is Trump is handing Ukraine to Russia. No, he's not. The document doesn't say that. Or Trump is abandoning the Asia Pacific. No, the document literally says the red lines are Taiwan and South China Sea, which every president of the U.S. would have said since, the 1950s. So I think the liberal criticism of this document would have to be honest. But the problem with that honesty is it would reveal the very reasons why America went to wars in an incorrect fashion, to change Iraq into a Wisconsin, to pursue universal human rights, and apply that pursuit in a hypocritical, highly selective manner. So Muslims in Bosnia matter, but Muslims in Iran hate America, and it's well, what? So I think that the reason that liberals don't attack this document on liberal grounds is that liberal grounds themselves have been a source of quite a lot of geopolitical volatility over the last 20 years. And that's why I would argue one of the reasons President Trump is the president is that I would argue that Barack Obama was elected because he was one of the, 3 senators who voted against the Iraq war, right? American voters yearn for the George Washington corollary, which is our involvement in the rest of the world should be limited and judicious, and that's why it's very difficult to write that criticism as a liberal, because it reveals that actually your threshold for intervention is much higher. Speaking of intervention,
yes, which is a perfect segue. I was going to say,
there we go.
Are we going to Venezuela?
Oh yes, sir.
All right,
we're going
the U.S.
right.
The U.S. right into it. The U.S. has seized a sanctioned oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. As always, President Trump has a way with words. I will quote the president here. Quote, "We've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela. Large tanker, very large, largest one ever, actually, and other things are happening." I can't do it. And then I loved this moment. A reporter asked him what would happen with the oil. And you could tell this was not very well thought through, or at least Trump wasn't listening to this part of the briefing. He fell asleep for this part because he said, "We keep it, I guess." It was this amazing moment where he was like, "I don't know. I guess we keep the oil. I don't know what we do with the oil. I seized the tanker. What else do you want me to do?" I did the hard part.
We're going to keep the oil, and this is not your grandmother's cooking oil. This is the kind of oil that runs cars and ships and
Some people say it was the largest tanker ever. You know, Jacob, he doesn't like me. I don't think he's very smart. I'm Marco. Yeah, I like him. Sometimes he's good, but I don't know. He also doesn't. He swerves. You know, I don't know what to say. It's again, like one of our readers or listeners, Paul. He can remain mythical, but his name is Paul. Said something very interesting. He said the national
Paul Atreides,
yes. We cross dimensions here and universe. One of our readers sent us an email, you know, and by the way, I hope one day we get big like Bill Simmons so we can have the mailbag because I would love it.
Me too.
Paul said, Marco, the national security strategy appears to be written by somebody who took a graduate course in 19th century geopolitics. And that was meant as a criticism. And my answer was, well, fucking about time. I don't care if whoever wrote this, you know, national security strategy took a graduate course in 19th century. At least see they took it, for God's sakes, okay? I didn't see a lot of that in the Joe Biden administration. But the point is, that was criticism, right? And then when I countered and said, finally, someone at least took a course, the retort from Paul was very good. And his argument was, okay, fine, I see what you're saying, but I hope they know how to implement it. And so on one hand, I truly believe this is the best written national security strategy that I've ever written. Now, that may not mean I rank it very highly, because I think most of American national security strategies were trash. This one, I think, correctly assesses what the world looks like and correctly applies the correct strategy to it. The problem is when you see the seizure of like oil from Venezuela or this nonsense about Europe being overrun by immigrants, like stop watching YouTube to get your empirical data. Like, yes, I understand someone walked into President Trump's office and said Venezuela has a lot of oil. It's also a country that's been run by a bunch of communist idiots for 25 years. Unless you're just planning on seizing the oil in the tankers, you can't actually increase oil production right away. So, you know, I wonder if they understand that, you know, like it will take years to get Venezuela back or to increase its production. This isn't that easy. And so that's where this entire, like, now look, if President Trump goes out and says, I listened to Marko and Jacob, and Marko says a lot of bad things about this war. Well, let me tell you. And he says, like, look, this is a long-term plan. Fine. Okay. Okay. This is a 5-year plan. Got it. But don't tell me that somebody in the White House expects to lower the CPI ahead of the midterms with this move. Because, I mean, it's not going to happen. You're not going to get barrels of oil flowing out of Venezuela within the next 12 to 18 months. It just doesn't work that way. You cannot restart production that easily in a country that's been that messed up.
Yeah, it's fine. I was talking to a friend of mine. You weren't on this email, but he's I don't know if he wants me to use his name, so I'll just say that he's a Peruvian analyst, like has his instincts there. And he was asking me about why are they doing things with oil? And he had this really interesting way of framing it. He talked about how this is colonial instincts on resources and Trump is giving oil to his friends, but he called it Trump's version of the Arab world in the Western Hemisphere, a British approach with a little bit of Arab seasoning on top. And I thought that was actually a really interesting way of thinking about it. And he also talked about when you're talking about both tyrants or billionaires or entrepreneurs, it's never enough. Like President Trump is never going to be satiated with the amount of wealth or the amount of accolades or the Nobel Peace Prize or the amount of oil that he possesses. He's always going to want more. It's always about consuming more and more and more. So maybe there's an element of that. But I'm the first with you. Like, I don't understand the focus on Venezuela and Venezuela's oil. I don't know what seizing tankers actually does here. I went on Polymarket, and I don't think seizing a Venezuelan tanker actually triggers the Polymarket bets on whether this is a U.S.-Venezuela engagement, like a military engagement either. So it just feels like it's this very small piecemeal, push forward to try and put pressure on the Maduro regime. And to our point earlier about, what Trump is doing is not going to end the EU and it's not going to end the Russia-Ukraine war. None of this is going to get rid of Maduro. None of it. So like, what are you doing? Like when the Maduro, I don't know if you saw this, the Maduro government came out afterwards and said, this is a flagrant act of piracy. Yeah. They're right. like we're just pirates. We're just taking oil
Jacob
tankers
is
for
pro
ourselves.
Maduro, you know. Jacob, I don't know. I bomb Iran for his people, and he says Maduro is right.
Very good. Have you
That's
been
the
working
thanks
on
I
that in the
get.
mirror? It seems like you've been doing stuff.
Polymarket has some interesting bets on, it's got some interesting bets. I don't know. Ukraine officially agrees to a US-backed ceasefire framework. This is a good one. January 31st, 25%. I think, look, I don't think, I think if it doesn't happen this year, I don't think it happens that early. So by March 31st, rises to 39%. Okay, that's a little bit closer to maybe reality, but that's an interesting one. That's the one where I would, I've been saying for a long time, this war is effectively like, there's no point anymore. Russians are moving 45 kilometers in 12 months. But I think that if we don't get a deal by December 31st, I don't think we get it before the summer. So I think the no is maybe a good buy, certainly for the January 31st. Did you see any good bet out there to lose hard-earned money on? Oh, this is a good one. This is a good one.
No.
This is a good one. Listen to this. 50-50. Russia-Ukraine ceasefire by the end of 2026. I think this is a buy. So I would go no. I would buy the no contract for a very little payout, by January 31st. I don't think we have a ceasefire by January 31st, but I do think there's like a non-linear, like collapse of probability of war staying. Like, I think it's 75% by the end of the year. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. And it's not a great risk reward either if it's at 50-50.
It is, yeah. That is true.
So I think it's a stay away for me. But before we leave Latin America, because I think the Venezuela stuff is sort of soaking up attention, I do want to say that I think the most important thing that happened this week was Mexico authorizing up to 50% tariffs on Chinese imports on Wednesday. This is something that Mexico had been talking about for months. There was actually talk of a lot of pushback in the Morena party against it. So even though Morena has a supermajority, it wasn't clear that Sheinbaum was going to be able to push this through because she was getting such opposition from her own party in the first place. And yet, it got through Congress, got a quick vote in Senate, and now it's going to go to Sheinbaum's desk, and it's going to go into effect in January. It's a massive deal. I mean, China is the second largest exporter to Mexico after the United States. It's still a third, roughly, of what the United States sold to Mexico. But still, if you're Mexico and you're trying to think about, reducing your dependence on the United States, China's really your only potential option in town. Mexico has also talked in recent years about some kind of closer strategic relationship with China. And yet here is Mexico basically saying, all right, we're going to align ourselves with the United States going forward, and we're going to dress it up and, this is going to help make Mexican manufacturing competitive. I mean, this sort of thing never does that, but it does directly align the United States with the Mexican economy. And it's so important because it's such a confirmatory signal of multipolarity. It's like it's the North American sphere of influence rising. It is such an important indicator that USMCA is just going to get approved without a lot of melodrama. And I think that's one of the biggest things that the market's been unsure about with all the talk of the 51st state and the cartels and everything else. So I think that's just a big deal. Just for me, it was interesting to see that come to fruition. I didn't want to leave without talking about it.
No, I think it's interesting. And I think what's also interesting about it is that there are still loopholes through various Asian economies into the US. So this actually may move some of that offshoring from Mexico to other places that are further away geographically from the US. So Malaysia, for example, could actually be the big winner as an example of this. Now, a couple of other thoughts to think about here. For what I've heard from Washington, D.C. insiders is that President Trump plans to meet with Xi 4 times, like once a quarter. There are also rumors that President Xi offered $1 trillion investment package into the U.S. And, supposedly it was the national security hawks who said no. Now, I doubt that. I just don't think Trump cares. I think he has zero he gives zero fucks about what national security hawks think. So I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it was offered, but what I would say is that President Trump, if he wants to meet with Xi once a quarter, I think the irony of what Mexico just did is that America's going to steal those factories from Mexico. It's not going to be Malaysia or Vietnam. I think there's a real chance in 26 that two things happen that nobody's really talking about, except one of my clients, shout out to that guy. I don't want to say who it is, but really smart, very, very smart finance guy. And he planted this into my head, and I was like, this is brilliant, of course. The big surprise in 2026 is that tariffs on China are going to come down. If President Trump wants to fiscally stimulate, I don't think he can. I think Congress is going to say no. But tariffs on China are actually a pretty significant portion of that 14.4% overall tariff level. And so that's the first thing that I would forecast as well. The second is that President Trump may have just kind of outwitted Xinjiang. Lots of pressure. Hey, put all these tariffs, no more offshoring. And then by the end of 2026, the big reveal is we're going to have a BYD factory in Ohio. As, by the way, he said during his campaign throughout 2024, he was saying that to cheering crowds of unionized workers in Ohio, by the way. Nobody was like booing him. And then the second thing, which I know many members of the White House who are very, very intelligent on this issue, is not only will we have BYD factories in Ohio, but they're going to have to share their IP with us. Which would be a power play move. Like genuinely, if you want truly America to be great, yeah, why not have $1 trillion worth of Chinese investment in the US? Why? Like, how's a BYD factory in Ohio, a national security threat? Are you kidding me? If China does something that you don't like, you seize it, you nationalize it. You're like, yoink. It's like that scene in The Simpsons when Homer gives Fidel Castro $1 billion bill, and he's like, what bill? What factory? What factory?
No. I've been saying for years now, half jokingly, that the United States should sign on to the Belt and Road Initiative, and I hope that China speedily in our days comes and rebuilds all the port infrastructure and rail infrastructure and water pump infrastructure around New Orleans. We could definitely use it. So any Chinese intelligence that are listening, please come on.
High-speed train from Sacramento, San Francisco down to San Diego. Let's go. What are we doing here, people?
Let's go.
Look, but the serious point is that. I've seen some commentary. I think you're right. This is a big deal. And a lot of commentary has been like, you see, there's not going to be any back door into the US. Like, no, the Chinese may be using a front door. And what Donald Trump may have just done is he's outwitted Xinjiang and Mexico and said, oh, no more offshoring, guys. Okay. And then boom, welcome here, China. So watch this space carefully. I think 26 is going to cause a lot of hawks. A lot of people who kind of get really excited about China and the US being enemies. I think it's going to be a surprising year for you guys. Okay.
Yeah. If you've been on this very early, and if you're right about this, I'm going to give you all your flowers and I'm going to eat all the humble pie. I'm taking the other side of this. I don't think this happens. And I think what this really means is that the US-Mexico manufacturing complex is going to get very, very deeply intertwined. And any cartels that want to mess with that progress, you will meet the United States Marine Corps. I think part of what's going on here with the buildup with forces and all of the menacing nature at the cartels is you also have to assure American businesses that are going into Mexico, you're going to be safe.
I mean, they will be safe. They will be safe. I mean, come on. What built Miami? Cocaine. Look, Donald Trump is a business guy. I've given him a lot of flowers on his tactical acumen. He's got to send Witkoff down to the cartels and be like, listen, guys, we can do, what is it? We can do the lead.
The easy way or the hard way?
The easy way or the highway. Easy way? I'll tell you what I told all the other sovereign groups I negotiated with. It's $100 billion per tariff. You know what I mean? Like, you have to put $400 billion worth of cocaine money into the Mexico-American manufacturing industry on the board. There you go. Go legit. Start some factories, which, obviously we already know a lot of that is happening. I mean, that's why for the most part, Mexican manufacturing and trade has never really been impacted by the cartel violence.
Yeah, it might have been. I mean, the other reason, yeah. I mean, also, like, China was just a better option. Like, NAFTA was supposed to create some of these dynamics, and then China was there. And if you had a brain, you were going to move your manufacturing to China, not to Mexico, because China has a special economic zone where everybody follows the rules, and you've got a bunch of workers who are not going to complain, and there's no cartels anywhere. It's only in this world that we live in that it starts to get competitive at all. By the way, though, you weren't saying this, but maybe Trump's next thing with drugs will be he's going to legalize cocaine, but he's going to impose a 400% tariff on cocaine coming into the United States. Boom, tariff, the multi-purpose tool here.
Yes, solve it. Yeah.
And Howard Lutnick will be out there saying, we're going to have cocaine made in the United States. That's what we're going to do. Thank you, President Trump, for this new industry. Oh, you can tell we're going off the rails a little bit here. All right, Marco, what else do we need to talk about before we say bye to the listeners?
I think nothing. I think this, it's late night over there. It's evening here. I guess my homework is to watch Andor, which I did start and I got to finish. You're absolutely right about that. So, yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in.
It's so good.
This late.
Yeah, and just before we go, I was tooling around on Polymarket because you asked me. There is an interesting one here. It says U.S. forces seize another Venezuela-linked oil ship in 2025. It's down to 44%, even as there are reports.
That's weird.
That the United States is preparing to seize more. So I'm not sure I'd jump at it quite yet. But if that got in the 30s, I think I'd take a little nibble at that.
No, even 50. Listen, you got to pick up some easy trades, and that seems like that's like an easy 56.
Yeah, it's also, this is where the whole thing has to be rigged, because this number was basically at 26%. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. You got to think that somebody in the administration has information and is like on Polymarket making some of these trades before the information actually hits the news wire, right? Like that's probably a thing that's happening.
I gotta say, and I'm not just saying this because it would be lucrative for the two of us, but like they gotta have someone make some more creative ones. Like the geopolitics section, I think should be cleaned up. There's just too many trades available. Too many are based on like a date. Like what are we doing here, people? Let's make it more creative. There should be more interesting ones, I think. I think they can do better.
Well, good. There's our appeal to Polymarket to round out the podcast. All right, listeners, we will see you.
Do better.
Do better.
Do better. Do better. And also, Nick, do better. And Ice, do better. Okay? Come on.
That's the nihilist bathing in his own nihilism, telling you guys to do better. So if you can't listen to him.
I know. Like, how did you get to my heart? You know what I mean? There's like layers and layers of bitterness. By the way, I think that's the title right there.
Layers of bitterness? No, do better. Yeah, you got it.
Oh, either one will work.